I've spoken with, over a dozen Jewish Democrats. Majority of them, are very pleased with what President Biden has been doing. They're not, critical of him whatsoever for the most part. But they are very fearful of what they're seeing from the left, some of the comments coming out and trying to raise awareness for, some of the anti-Semitism that they're seeing.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by congressional reporter Samantha-Jo Roth. SJ, President Biden is starting to see some divisions within his party over the war between Israel and Hamas. Senator Bernie Sanders has kind of split with the president a bit on this. What has been the latest?
So basically, Senator Bernie Sanders has been, really outspoken over the last month or so, saying, Israel should not be receiving any extra federal funding. Obviously, Congress was considering allocating some funding for a package, that has all been held up based on the border disputes and such. But basically, what he's really talking about is just saying, I don't agree with how Israel has been retaliating, and we should not be giving them any more funding to fund this. And so he's written letters, he's been really outspoken, and this is after, he was actually receiving a lot of pressure from the left when he did not immediately call for a ceasefire. So this is something that we've been seeing. We've been hearing, some more calls from Democrats who want to see Israel be a little bit more, conscious of the civilian toll.
Sure.
So there's definitely this push and pull within the party, and obviously Bernie Sanders is really, the face of all of that.
I mean, he's certainly the face of the progressive left in the Senate. But one aspect of this that you've written about is this is particularly a point of tension for some Jewish Democrats in Congress, and they've faced pressure sort of from both sides on how to really handle this issue.
Yeah, it's absolutely something that is dividing the party, and I've spoken with, over a dozen Jewish Democrats. Majority of them, are very pleased with what President Biden has been doing. They're not, critical of him whatsoever for the most part. But they are very fearful of what they're seeing from the left, some of the comments coming out and trying to raise awareness for, some of the anti-Semitism that they're seeing, pointing out some of these, chants are anti-Semitic in nature. And some of them are just very disappointed in general with, the issue of anti-Semitism and how exactly the Democratic Party is dealing with it. One specific woman that I spoke with even pointed out during that hearing with the college presidents, talking about how Stefanik was the one who was really calling out anti-Semitism, and that Democrats were not, as fierce on these issues. And that was disappointing to some of these Democrats who have been lifelong Democrats. I will say there was a very small portion of them that are saying, maybe I'll consider a Republican. That was not all of them. That was a very small portion. But I will say overall, Democrats who are Jewish that I spoke with said that they're frustrated, that this is, going on in the party, and that even that Biden is being questioned by some of these Democrats. And it is important to note that, Senator Bernie Sanders does identify as a Jew as well. So he's sort of, an outlier in all of this.
So you're getting ready to go on a big trip to the land of pizza ranches and Oreos and fried things on sticks and, all that kind of stuff. What are you expecting to see when you go to Iowa?
Well, you forgot the gas station pizza. We love the gas station pizza as well.
Which is better than gas station sushi.
It is. I'm really excited to go back. The last cycle I covered was 2016, and that was when Ted Cruz was really dominant in the state. So obviously a lot of things have changed. From the sources that I'm speaking with on the ground, it really does seem like President Trump is very dominant in the state. And while the president has not been there, or the former president has not been there as much as some of these other candidates, he has built a campaign operation over the last couple of years, and these other candidates like Haley and DeSantis and Ramaswamy, they're really just playing catch up.
Right.
This is an operation that they have had for years and years. They have, a huge network of resources, and it's hard for them to compete. One source of mine said he thinks that Trump is going to be number one, DeSantis number two, Haley number three. I've heard that from a couple people.
Sure.
Obviously, it's really impossible to predict how these things are going to go. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what the voters think. I mean, we all, here in D.C. have we're sitting in the nation's capital.
Beltway, ivory tower,
yes.
Swamp creature thing, whatever.
Exactly. So we don't know what the Iowa voters are thinking. So, when I last covered the Iowa caucuses, caucus goers, typically would always say you would approach them in the weeks leading up to the caucus, and maybe things were a little different when there was candidates who hadn't been president in the past.
Sure.
But, classically, Iowa voters say that they wait until the last minute. You would ask them and they wouldn't know. They would be still making up their minds.
Yeah.
Is that even happening anymore this cycle? That's a big question of mine. So I'm curious to see if people are already aligned on their sides, or if they're actually, going to these candidate events and actually listening to what these candidates have to say.
And caucusing is a bit more of a commitment than just showing up and dropping a piece of paper in a ballot box.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that Republicans do it is a little different than the way that Democrats do it. And obviously, we're not going to see Democrats doing it because they pushed back their caucus. So they're not going to be doing it in the same way. But basically, with the Republicans, is you're going to see representatives or even the candidates themselves standing up, giving a speech, and then everyone in the precinct basically writes down who they're caucusing for, and then they turn it in. That's the Republican process. It's not quite as fun as the Democrats, who have to physically line up in each of the areas of the room, which gets to be a little confusing.
Which is why they got rid of that, the Democrats did.
Yes, yeah, very confusing, I will tell you. I've been to several of them, and there were lots of disputes on who won and who had threshold, but it's a really interesting process that not a lot of states do, and it's always a pleasure to be able to see democracy in action like that.
Well, I hope at least one presidential candidate bags your groceries while you're there.
Well, I hope we actually know who the winner is.
That night.
Yeah, that would be really nice. It's been a couple cycles since we've been able to say that, so.
Thank you, SJ.
Thank you.
You can read Samantha-Jo and the rest of our politics team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.